Now let's move forward and talk about one more important concept, like how to create your private virtual machine inside your private subnet and how you can access that particular private virtual machine using the jump host or the Bastion host. So far in the demo, what we have seen is that we are able to access a virtual machine which is accessible with the public IP. So if you take a look onto this particular diagram and this virtual machine, so this has a public IP address and that public IP address is accessible from anywhere. So this is me. I was trying to access that particular virtual machine and I had a private key on my laptop. The same setup can work for any virtual machine on which you assign a public IP and you have your private key with your laptop so that you can access that particular virtual machine. But what if the case that this particular virtual machine which doesn't have a public IP address, how you are going to access that particular virtual machine? And first of all, why do you need to create a private virtual machine? So those are the questions you need to understand for this particular setup. Let's try to address that. Why do you need a private virtual machine within your private subnet? To answer that, here you can see this is the private subnet we have created, and on the left hand side we had a public subnet with the web. So this particular subnet, if I am trying to deploy any virtual machine, it will have a public IP address. But this particular subnet where I will try to deploy any virtual machine will not have a public IP address. Okay, so let's take a very simple example, like you have a web application where the front end is deployed onto the public subnet where it gets the public IP. But whatever data operation, the store part or the database which we are trying to have for that particular application is residing onto this private subnet, because database is just internal for this particular web application. All right, and that database will only be accessible from this particular virtual machine where to this side. So that particular database is only accessible from the web application which is deployed into the public subnet from here to here. And this particular like a backend or database which we are running inside this particular private subnet has nothing to do with the public IP address, because if a user is sitting over here, then that user doesn't need, or he doesn't understand what this database is. He needs to interact with the web application, and then web application will do all the interaction with the database. So that's the reason that you would need a private virtual machine which doesn't have a public IP. And this is also important from the security point of view, because you don't want to expose your backend with the public IP address, because as soon as you start exposing the backend component with the public IP address, then you are increasing the attack vector for your application. So that's the one of the simplest example I can take to explain why do you need a private virtual machine within private subnet. Now coming back to the next question, why do we need a jump host or the Bastion host for accessing the virtual machine which is running into the private subnet? The answer is quite simple. So if I take this particular example once again, so this doesn't have a public IP. If it doesn't have a public IP, then this particular user, which is consider as me, I'm sitting somewhere in the world with my private laptop, I cannot access this particular virtual machine from my laptop because it doesn't have a public IP. Then what's the way which I will be able to access that particular virtual machine? The only way possible is that I need to go to the virtual machine which has a public IP and which machine is also present into the same VPC. So here you can see. So this is the VPC where we have deployed this public subnet as well as private subnet. So if I'm able to access this particular virtual machine with the public IP which is deployed into the same VPC as a private subnet, then this particular machine should have access to this particular virtual machine. So what I will do in the first step, I will try to SSH into this particular public virtual machine. Once I access to this particular public virtual machine, from there I will just try to access to the private virtual machine. So that's the jump we are doing from a public virtual machine to the private virtual machine within the same subnet. So that's why we call it as a jump host or a Bastion host. I hope you're able to understand why do we need a private virtual machine and the jump host. Now let's try to perform the demo, and now we are going to set up the private subnet with the IP range. Let me show you the IP range over here. So here you can see this is the IP range we are going to assign to this particular private subnet, and after that we are going to spin up a private virtual machine. And this part we have already done it. So this public subnet with the name web is already available, and this is the CIDR range for our public subnet. Let me show you onto our Google Cloud Console. So here, if I jump to Google Cloud Console over here, then here just type go to VPC and go to VPC network. And here in the VPC network, this is the VPC which we have created. Let's go over there, click on this particular VPC and click on subnet. So here you can see we already have a public subnet with the name web over here, and this is the IP range of that particular public subnet. I'm just keep reminding you these settings because this will be needed once we set up our private subnet. Okay. Now we need to set up our private subnet. So here on the top, you will find an option for a add subnet. So click on this particular option. And here you need to enter the name. So here I'm going to enter the name of my private subnet, which I'll copy from my notepad and paste it over here. So CL sub sandbox private EU North 201. So this is again a sandbox subnet, which is a private subnet I'm trying to create over here. VPC network, here you can see it is getting created into the same VPC which we have been working so far. After that, the region, here I'm going to choose Europe North 2, which is our Stockholm region. Okay, after that we need to specify the IP range. So here I'm going to specify the IP range, which is 10.100.2.0/24. You can see onto our diagram as well. So this is the IP range which we are going to assign. So here it is differentiating from a 2, and here in the public subnet it is differentiating from a 1. So that's the key range difference between these two subnets. Okay, after that let's go further, and rest of the things I'm not going to change anything, so I will keep it as a private Google access off and hybrid subnet off, and then click on add subnet over here. So it will take a few minutes to create the private subnet. I'll be back once this subnet is created. Here you can see the subnet has been created. The private subnet is ready with this particular CIDR range. The next thing which we need to create is to create our virtual machine. Let me show you this one. So now we need to create this particular virtual machine with this particular name. Okay, now I'll get back to my Google Cloud Console, and here in this Google Cloud Console, you just need to type the VM instances. Click on this VM instances over here. And here, click on the create instance button. Here we are going to assign the name to my virtual machine. So here I'm going to choose the CLVM sandbox private. So I'm going to use the keyword private so that I can identify this is our private virtual machine. After that, the region, I'm going to choose that Europe North 2 because I'm working into the Europe North 2 region, and the zone I'm going to choose any. After that, I'm going to choose the E2 and the capacity. So machine type I'm going to choose is the E2 small. That's the capacity I'm going to assign because I'm going to do it this setup for the demo. And this is the cost which you can see for this particular virtual machine for a month. After that, go to the OS and storage. So here I'm keeping everything default. I'm going with the Debian Linux virtual machine. You can choose if you want to. Next, go to the data protection. I'll keep everything default over here. Go to the networking. This is important. Here in the networking section, we need to assign the VPC and the private subnet. So here, click on this network interfaces, and in the network interfaces, instead of default, we need to choose our VPC. So here, choose the VPC, which is our CL VPC sandbox, and here choose the subnet, which is private. So let me show you on the diagram. So here I'm going to show you. So this is going to be the VPC, and this is going to be our subnet. Okay. Let's go further. And here, one more thing which I would like to take a look over here is the external IP. So here, if you take a look, this is the one. So we don't need to assign an external IP. So we need to disable this particular setting. So to do that, what you need to do is just click on this drop down and select none over here. So now you will not get a public IP for this particular virtual machine. Okay, after that, go to the observability. We don't need to change anything. Security, yes, we need to change few things over here. So let me show you the previous slide which I have explained to you about the public key and private key. So this is the virtual machine where we are working, but to access this particular virtual machine, we again need to do the same setup of a public key and private key, which we have done it on our public subnet. So again, I'm going to use the same public key over here, so that once this user logs in, so this user is going to log in into first this particular public virtual machine. From here, this user is going to use the same private key over here, and from here it is going to perform the login over here. Okay, so the things are very simple over here. So here we are going to put our public key, and once user performs the login over here into the public virtual machine, from there it is going to use the private key, which we are going to paste over there as well. So here we are going to have our private key. Sorry, I'm just writing it through mouse, so it is looking like this. So here I'm going to put the private key. So first it is going to jump over here, and from here it is going to jump over here. Okay, so now I'm going to associate the public key to this particular virtual machine. Okay, so let's get back to our terminal, and here this is the public key. Let me show you. I'll clear the screen once again. And here, this is our private key, this one, and this is our public key. So let's do the cat and type pub. Copy this public key from here. Go back to your console, and here go to manage access, and here select the option of a manually generated SSH keys. Click on add item over here, paste the key. After that, we are done for the SSH key. Click on next on the advanced. We don't need to change anything over here. Then after that, click on create. So now we have created our private virtual machine, and we have associated the public key, and we are using the same private key. All right, so now here you can see it will take a few minutes over here to provision the virtual machine. And as you can see already that it has assigned the internal IP address. There is no external IP address for me to access. So if I remove this one, so here you can see the virtual machine has been provisioned with the internal IP address. There is no public IP address. Okay, so how we will work on this one? So now this virtual machine has been provisioned. Let me go back. Here. So let me show you once again. So now this virtual machine has been provisioned. So we are going to log into this particular machine, and from here we are going to perform login onto this particular virtual machine. Now the private virtual machine is up and running, which we can see, which I have shown you. Let me show you once again over here. So here you can see this particular virtual machine is up and running. Okay, now the next thing is we need to create the firewall rules to access this particular virtual machine over here, because we will be accessing this virtual machine from here, from this particular public subnet. So we need to create a firewall rule to allow the access from this CIDR range, from this IP range to this particular virtual machine. So that's the first firewall rule which we need to create. So what we are going to do, we are going to set up some firewall rule where we are going to allow the SSH from this CIDR range, as well as we are going to allow the ICMP as well. So ICMP is a ping protocol, so which we are going to allow from this particular CIDR range. And for that, if I show you, so we are going to create this particular firewall rule, and this firewall rule, we are going to create this particular tag for this particular firewall rule. All right, so let's get back to our Google Cloud Console and create this firewall rule. To create the firewall rule, in the search box, you need to type firewall, click on the firewall over here, and here At the bottom, you can see all the existing firewall rules, and here on the top, you will see a create a firewall rule option. So let's click on this firewall rule over here. And here we need to enter the name. So let me copy the name of my firewall rule. So this is going to be the name of my firewall rule, which is CLFW sandbox private, which is for private subnet. So this rule is only applicable for my private subnet. So I just try to put the name more descriptive so that I can identify which firewall rule I am applying to. After that, we need to choose the network. So here I'm going to choose the network as the same VPC. So if you take a look onto this particular VPC, so this is the VPC where we are working. So we need to create the firewall rule into this particular VPC. Okay, so let's get back and choose the VPC as CL VPC sandbox. After that, the protocol as well as the tags which we need to create. So here we can assign the tag, and the tag name which I'm going to create is this one. So here you can see this is the tag option. Let me copy once again the name, and here we need to specify the tag, which is this one, CLVM private sub allow SSH, and the same tag which we are going to assign to our virtual machine. All right, so this is the tag. This is a free tag, so you can use any useful name for creating the tags. All right, the source IP range, this is important. So here you need to specify the source IP range over here. So here we need to, I'll show you which IP range which we need to specify. So here you can see this is our source IP range from where the request will come. So this is going to be our public virtual machine, and from here the request will come to access this particular virtual machine. So to do that, what you need to do, you just need to go back, and here we need to specify the IP range, which is this one. So it will originate from our public IP address of our public subnet. So that's the range I'm going to specify. Again, take a look. So here the request will originate from this public IP address range. After that, go further, and here click on TCP, click on port. Here we need to specify the SSH port, so that is going to be 22, and the other protocol which is going to be the ICMP for ping. Okay, and after that you can just click on create this firewall rule. So here it will take a few minutes, and here you can see our this particular firewall rule has been created. After the firewall rule has been created, you need to associate this firewall rule to this particular virtual machine. And remember, we already created this particular tag, so just we need to assign this particular tag to this particular virtual machine. Okay, now what we need to do, we just need to go back to our virtual machine over here in the search box, type VM instances. Let me click on the VM instances once again. And here, this is our private virtual machine. So click on this particular private virtual machine over here. And here I need to click on edit, which you can see. Click on edit over here. And here you will find the option for a network. Let me show you. If you go further down over here, then here you will find the option for a network tags. So here you can assign the same tag which you have created for the network firewall rules. So let me copy which the name of that particular network tag. So I'm going to copy the same value, paste it over here, and click on save. Click on save over here, and it will take a minute to update these settings. And after that, I'm going to show you how we can access this particular virtual machine without the public IP address through our public virtual machine. So here you can see the settings has been updated, and now both the machines are up and running. So let me show you the diagram once again. So now we will try to access this particular virtual machine first, which is running into this particular subnet, and from here we are going to access this particular virtual machine. Let's first try to access our public virtual machine, which is this one with the public IP address this. Okay, Now I'll just copy this public IP address, go back to my terminal, and here I'm going to run the command sshi, and after that I'm going to specify the private key along with my username and then the the public IP address of my virtual machine. And here you can see I'm able to access my public virtual machine. Okay, now the next thing which we need to do is we need to update the private key, or we need to copy the private key into this particular virtual machine. So here into this one, let me show you from the diagram. If I go back over here, so now we need to copy the private IP over here, and that private IP through which we will be able to access this particular virtual machine with the public key present into this one. So here I have already copied the public IP, private SSH key over here, so which you can see. Now what we need to do is we need to copy the private IP address, which is this one. So copy this private IP address from here, and here SSHI, and here we need to type the key. Let me clear the screen over here. So here we need to type SSHI, after that the name of the key, which is this one, paste over here, and here I need to type the username, and after that the private IP address, which is this one ending with 2.3, and hit enter. It is accepting the request, type yes and hit enter, and here you can see we are able to access our private virtual machine. So this is how this whole setup works, and this is how you can set up your jump host, Bastion host to access your private virtual machine running into private subnet.